Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to Sandal College Boys Section Online Class Second Year. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Here is Akhtar Saeed, your English teacher. Today we are going to discuss a very beautiful and world famous novel, Goodbye, Mr. Chips. We'll discuss history, characters, and brief summary of the novel Goodbye, Mr. Chips इन क्रोनोलॉजिकल ऑर्डर। मुझे यकीन है कि आज के इस लेक्चर के बाद एक मुकम्मल नावल का खाका आपके जहन में बैठ जाएगा और फिर जब हम इसकी चैप्टर वाइज टेक्स्ट पढ़ेंगे तो आपको बहुत अच्छे तरीके से उसकी समझ आएगी। Goodbye, Mr. Chips has been written by James Hilton. James Hilton was an English novelist and journalist. He is best remembered for several bestsellers, including Lost Horizon and Goodbye, Mr. Chips. In 1938, he had moved to America and then he stayed there in America till his death and wrote Hollywood screenplays. He also won an Academy Award in 1942. Academy Award को ऑस्कर अवार्ड भी कहा जाता है और ये एंटरटेनमेंट की दुनिया का, फिल्मी दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा अवार्ड माना जाता है फॉर हिज वर्क ऑन द स्क्रीन प्ले ऑफ मिसिज मिनेवर बेस्ड ऑन द नॉवल बाय जैन स्ट्रदर. नाउ लेट्स डिस्कस द ब्रीफ हिस्ट्री ऑफ द नॉवल. गुडबाय मिस्टर चिप्स इज़ अ नॉविला. नॉविला डियर स्टूडेंट्स एक शॉर्ट नावल को कहते हैं जो फुल लेंथ नावल की तरह नहीं होता. अबाउट द लाइफ ऑफ अ स्कूल टीचर मिस्टर चिपिंग एंड हिज लॉन्ग टेन्योर एट ब्रुकफील्ड स्कूल. डियर स्टूडेंट्स ब्रुकफील्ड स्कूल इज़ अ फिक्शनल माइनर ब्रिटिश बॉयज़ बोर्डिंग स्कूल. बोर्डिंग स्कूल को रेजिडेंशियल स्कूल भी कहा जाता है यानी अकामती इदारा. ऐसे इदारे जहाँ स्टूडेंट्स और स्टाफ उधर ही कैंपस पे रहते हैं उन्हें बोर्डिंग स्कूल या रेजिडेंशियल स्कूल कहा जाता है. लोकेटेड इन द फिक्शनल विलेज ऑफ ब्रुकफील्ड इन द फैनलैंड्स. Little Brown and Company USA first published Goodbye Mr. Chips in June 1934 and it attracted a lot of people across the world. Then it was also published by Hodder and Stoughton UK in October 1934. It is amazing that 15,000 copies were sold on the day of its publication. It has been adapted into 2 cinema films, 2 television presentations, radio and theatre as well. James Hilton portrayed his teacher William Henry Belgarny as Mr. Chips. Mr. Belgarny served at the Leys School, Cambridge. ये वो स्कूल है जहाँ जेम्स हिल्टन खुद पढ़ते थे और ये नावल उन्होंने अपने टीचर विलियम हेनरी बेलगार्नी को ट्रिब्यूट पेश करने के लिए लिखा. एक और मौका पर जेम्स हिल्टन ने कहा कि इस नावल की इंस्पिरेशन उनके अपने फादर की तरफ से भी आई जो खुद एक अच्छे इदारे के हेडमास्टर भी थे. Now dear students, let's discuss the important characters of Goodbye Mr. Chips. First of all, Mr. Chips himself. Mr. Chipping, known as Mr. Chips, is the hero of the novel. He teaches at Brookfield School for 45 years, a very devoted and disciplined personality. Next important character is Catherine. Catherine Bridges is Mr. Chips' wife. She is only 25 years of age when they get married. She is a very dynamic lady. She brings positive changes in Mr. Chips, but unfortunately she dies just after 2 years of their marriage in a childbirth along with their infant son. The next important character is Mrs. Wickett. Mrs. Wickett is Mr. Chips' landlady. Mr. Chips lives in her house as a paying guest. She respects and looks after him in a very good way. Mr. Ralston. Mr. Ralston, a very young headmaster of 37, a very authoritative and modern. He has a row with Mr. Chips on the matter of Chips' retirement. Both Mr. Chips and Mr. Ralston do not like each other. Next important character is Mr. Chatteris. Mr. Chatteris is another headmaster who respects Mr. Chips and he requests Mr. Chips to rejoin school during the World War I. Both Mr. Chips and Mr. Chatteris like each other. Now, dear students, let's discuss the summary of the novel in chronological order. First of all, 1848 is the year when Mr. Chips was born. There is no mention of his parents nor his relatives in this novel. 1869, when Mr. Chips was 21 years of age, after graduating from Cambridge, Mr. Chips joined Melbury School, but due to some disciplinary issues, he had to leave it just after 1 year. 1870, a very important year in the novel Goodbye, Mr. Chips. Mr. Chips, at that time, a very handsome and gorgeous youth of 22 years. Dear students, 1870 में 7 इम्पॉर्टेंट इवेंट्स पेश आते हैं जो मैं वन बाय वन आपसे शेयर करता हूँ. नंबर 1, मिस्टर चिप्स ज्वाइंट ब्रुकफील्ड स्कूल इन 1870. Number 2, Mr. Chips had a first meeting with the legendary headmaster, Mr. Weatherby. Number 2, Mr. Chips prepared the syllabus of Latin and Greek under the supervision of Weatherby. Number 4, Mr. Weatherby died. I want to tell you that Mr. Weatherby joined Brookfield in 1840, so he served Brookfield for 30 years. Number 5, Mr. Meldrum replaced Mr. Weatherby and he remained headmaster till the year 1900. Number 6, Franco-Prussian War started in 1870, यानी फ्रांस और जर्मनी में ये लड़ाई शुरू हुई 1870 में. Last, that is 7, Chips punished Cole, a very interesting event we will discuss in the first chapter of the novel. He taught 3 generations of the Cole family. ये बहुत ही interesting episode होगी जो हम first chapter में पढ़ेंगे. 1870 to 1896, ये वो दौर है जब मिस्टर चिप्स को एहसास हो गया कि वो कोई बहुत आला पाए के स्कॉलर नहीं हैं. ही रियलाइज्ड हिज मीडियोकर डिग्री एंड सेटल्ड डाउन एट ब्रुकफील्ड. ही वॉज लाइक्ड एंड रेस्पेक्टेड बट नॉट लव्ड बाय द प्यूपल्स, आई मीन द स्टूडेंट्स. वो एक बहुत अच्छे टीचर के तौर पे वो सेटल डाउन हो गए, वो इस्टेब्लिश उन्होंने अपने आप को कर लिया, लेकिन बच्चों के दिल में वो जो एक मोहब्बत होती है वो बच्चों के लिए अभी एक मोटिवेशन साबित नहीं हुए थे. 1896, another important year in the novel Goodbye, Mr. Chips. Mr. Chips went to the Lake District during summer vacation with his colleague Rowden, who had to come back after a week. उन्हें अपने किसी ख़ानदानी मसले की वजह से वापस आना पड़ा था, लेकिन मिस्टर चिप्स उधर ही रहे थे. उन्होंने घर किराए पे ले लिया था और काफ़ी दिन तक उधर ही रहे. ऑन द ग्रेट गैबल, यह अपने नाम याद रखना, एक पहाड़ी का नाम है. ऑन द ग्रेट गैबल, इन हिज एफर्ट टू हेल्प अ गर्ल, ही स्लिप्ड एंड रैंच्ड हिज एंकल. वहाँ एक लड़की खड़ी थी, वो हाथ हिला रही थी अपनी किसी फ्रेंड को, और मिस्टर चिप्स समझे कि वो उन्हें बुला रही है. वो उनको बचाने के लिए तेज़ी से ऊपर चढ़ने लगे पहाड़ी पर, तो स्लिप हो गए और गिर गए. और लड़की देख रही थी कि वो मेरी वजह से गिरे हैं. शी वॉज कैथरीन who took him to his residence and nursed him. वो बाइसिकल चलाती थी, वो डेली उनके घर में उनकी नर्सिंग के लिए, उनकी देखभाल करने के लिए आती थी. She was a very beautiful girl of just 25 years. Mr. Chips was 48 years then. उनके ख़यालात आपस में बिल्कुल मुख्तलिफ थे, बिल्कुल नहीं मिलते थे. शी वॉज़ अ वेरी मॉडर्न गर्ल बट मिस्टर चिप्स वॉज़ अ ट्रेडिशनलिस्ट, अ वेरी कंजर्वेटिव, बट दे फेल इन लव विद ईच अदर एंड गॉट मैरिड इन लंदन. ऑन द नाइट बिफोर वेडिंग, जब कैथरीन को पता चला कि बच्चे मिस्टर चिप्स को मिस्टर चिप्स कहते हैं, चिपिंग नहीं कहते, तो उसने भी कहा गुड बाय मिस्टर चिप्स with a mock gravity. This phrase became the title of this novel. She proved a wonderful wife who created very positive changes in Mr. Chips that brought him love of the students. शादी से पहले तक बच्चों की तरफ से उसको लव नहीं मिली थी, लेकिन शादी के बाद उनमें इतनी पॉजिटिव चेंजेस आईं, उनकी पढ़ाई में, उनके एटीट्यूड में, उनके मजाक में इस कदर खूबसूरती आ गई कि बच्चे उनसे लव करने पे मजबूर हो गए. Catherine Bridges became popular among the staff and students alike. She actively participated in all school activities, social and musical concerts. उसने बहुत ही थोड़े से अरसे में बच्चों के दिल में और स्टाफ के दिल में और इवन टीचर्स की बेगमात के दिल में घर कर लिया. She herself was a good musician as well. She gave the idea of playing a match between the boys of Mission School and those of Brookfield. Brookfield के टीचर्स और इनके बच्चों की डोनेशन से लंदन में एक मिशन स्कूल था जहां गरीब बच्चे पढ़ते थे, और कैथरीन ब्रिजेस ने आइडिया पेश किया कि उन बच्चों में और ब्रुकफील्ड के बच्चों में एक सॉकर मैच यानी फुटबॉल का मैच कंडक्ट किया जाए. At first, everyone opposed the idea, but she convinced them all for the match. This match proved to be a wonderful success. 1897. Just after 2 years of their successful married life, she died in childbirth along with their child. Chips could never forget her throughout his life. Year 1900. Mr. Meldrum, the headmaster of Brookfield School, died, and Mr. Chips, being the senior most teacher in the faculty, was appointed the acting head of Brookfield first time in his career. Mr. Ralston, a young man of 37, was appointed headmaster. He was very strict and modern and wanted the same from the staff. He could reduce the big hall to silence by just lifting his eyebrow. He was so strict and he was so disciplinarian कि उनके आंख के एक इशारे से पूरा हॉल खामोशी में डूब जाता था. Ralston didn't like Mr. Chips for his old methodology and weird attitude. 1908. Mr. Chips became 60 years of age. Ralston asked him to retire, but he refused. A row started between the two. It was overheard by a student. The news spread like wildfire that Ralston insulted Mr. Chips. Everyone along with the board of the school stood by Mr. Chips, so he stayed. 1911. Ralston left Brookfield, and even younger man of 34 years of age, Mr. Chatteris, appointed headmaster of Brookfield. Mr. Chatteris recognized in Mr. Chips a Brookfield institution. Both respected each other a lot. 1913. When Mr. Chips became 65 years of age, he got bronchitis and he finally decided to retire. He delivered a historic speech on this eve of his retirement. He started living at Mrs. Wickett's house across the road. He kept in touch with school. He often went there to see matches. Mr. Chips invited new staff and boys to tea at his house, so he considered himself the very much part of Brookfield School. 1914. 28 July 1914, that was the date, that was the time when World War I started. Most of the teachers joined the war. That created problem for Mr. Chatteris to run the school smoothly. He was diabetic also. 1916. In July 1916, Mr. Chatteris came to see Mr. Chips and requested him to rejoin Brookfield because he was having a lot of problems in the school, which Mr. Chips readily accepted with a holy joy in his heart. 1917. Mr. Chatteris fell ill in winter and ultimately died in April. Mr. Chips was appointed acting head second time in his career, but he refused to be a permanent headmaster of Brookfield. 1918. The World War I ended on 11th November 1918 and the school celebrated it. He got cold during the celebrations and on the same night he sent his resignation. 1930. He made his will. उन्होंने अपनी वसीयत तैयार की. He gave his legacies to Mrs. Wickett and Mission and also founded an open entrance scholarship टू द स्कूल. तो उन्होंने इस तरह से अपनी सारी ज़िंदगी स्कूल के लिए वक्फ़ कर दी, बच्चों के लिए वक्फ़ कर दी, बल्कि मरने के बाद अपनी लेगेसीज़ मिसेस विकेट और मिशन स्कूल को दे दी और जो उनके अकाउंट में पैसे थे उनसे उन्होंने स्कूल के लिए एक ओपन एंट्रेंस स्कॉलरशिप का इनकाद करने के लिए रिक्वेस्ट की अपनी वसीयत में कि ओपन एंट्रेंस स्कॉलरशिप के ज़रिए से जितने भी बच्चे आएंगे उनकी फ़ीस उस फंड से दी जाएगी. एंड डियर स्टूडेंट्स, एट लास्ट 1933. In November 1933, and it was a very cold and foggy day, a small boy Linford came to see him. Mrs. Wickett was off to village, so Mr. Chips had to come downstairs to receive him at the door. Mr. Chips served him tea and then he had come again to downstairs to see him off at the front door. While leaving, Linford said, "Goodbye, Mr. Chips." He recalled that Catherine also used the same words a day before their marriage and tears came in his eyes. He got cold and fainted. When he came to senses, he found Mrs. Wickett, Dr. Merivale, Cartwright, द न्यू हेडमास्टर. हालांकि ये 1919 से वहाँ काम कर रहे थे, लेकिन मिस्टर चिप्स उन्हें अभी भी न्यू हेडमास्टर ही कहा करते थे. एंड ओल्ड बफल्स देयर अराउंड हिम. और वो बड़े हैरान हुए कि ये सब लोग मेरे कमरे में क्या कर रहे हैं. At last he died dreaming of thousands of boys he had taught in his career. Goodbye, Mr. Chips. That's all of today's lecture, dear students. If you have any question, if you have any problem, you may comment in the comment section below. I'll be there to answer your questions. Till some next lecture, take a very good care of yourself and your dear ones. Thank you very much.